It was 2 outs. Washington was winning, I think, 7-5. A couple of kids went onto the field. Security got him and brought him back into the stands. And then, of all things, the 2 outs meant that this next out could be the end of Major League Baseball here for a while. And thousands of people, the security could not even begin to handle it. It was like a tornado coming onto the field. They tried to stop you and you and you, and then they were overwhelmed.
It was like an army of ants invaded the field. Just everybody poured out of the stands.
You know, people were trying to rip out the pitching rubber, home plate. People ran off with the bases. Some of my fellow students who did get onto the field came back with one of them. I'll never forget this. His name was Bruce O'Malley. He came back with an entire seat. He had actually kicked an entire seat out from the bolts. Another fellow came back with light bulbs out of the scoreboard.
Fans who were at that game were in an angry mood, clearly. And when they came on the field in the 9th inning with 2 outs, they didn't care whether or not the game was forfeited at that point in time. Going out with a victory didn't matter at that point in time. They were angry, and they were going to take out their frustrations on RFK Stadium, and they did. And so a 7-5 potential Senators win turned into a 9-0 forfeit. And I don't think anybody regretted it. Now, I'll tell you this, I wasn't at the game, but had I been there, I'm sure I would have been out on the field with everybody else.
Well, nobody thought it was the tragedy that it turned out to be, really. People thought baseball would be away for a year or two. They weren't happy about that, that sort of semi-riot that took place at the end of the game it wasn't a reflection of that baseball was leaving Washington forever. It was just, we're losing our team and our players. That's all. You get attached to these guys and to a team, and you don't want them leaving. You don't want them going. You don't even, a real baseball fan, and you're disappointed when one of your players goes to another team. You feel like you've lost a cousin or has died or something. You've lost this guy. And so nobody conceived of the idea that it would be 34 years before baseball would come back, and that the Washington, D.C. would be without a Major League Baseball team for 34 years. Inconceivable.
To the bitter end of the 1971 season, Washington baseball fans were left wanting, but still hopeful that something would be done. Yet, on the day of that painful last game, the history of baseball in this city seemed to come to an end.
Major League Baseball in Washington dates back to the 19th century, but the original National League team had gone out of business. The National League had contracted from 12 teams to 8 teams in 1899. The new American League started in 1901, and Washington was one of the charter franchises, and they were terrible to start with. They were underfinanced, and they didn't have very many good players, but in 1907, they were able to sign a pitcher who was playing for a team in Weiser, Idaho, named Walter Johnson. And they also got Clyde Milan about the same time, and they started to put together some players.
Players like Long Tom Hughes, George McBride, Charles Gabby Street, Herman Germany Schaefer, John Henry, and catcher Eddie Ainsmith, who, in an era of tough baseball players, was probably the toughest of them all. He once stood up to heckling from the New York Giants dugout by challenging the entire team to a fight. Nobody took him on.
1912, they brought Clark Griffith to manage the team, and everything started to fall into place.
Clark Griffith, known as the Old Fox, entered the field of professional baseball as a pitcher in 1891 with St. Louis, and later played for Boston, Chicago, and New York. He moved about the baseball world for many years through the turn of the century. In 1912, however, Clark Griffith found his permanent home in Washington, becoming the manager and largest single stockholder in the ball club.
They didn't always finish last, because Clyde Griffith became the manager in 1912, and all of a sudden, for 2 straight years, the Senators were in second place.
In 1912, the Nationals' record was 91 wins and 61 losses, finishing second to the Philadelphia Athletics. In 1913, their record was 90 and 64. Walter Johnson led the American League with 36 wins. The phrase, first in war, first in peace, last in the American League, didn't quite describe the team anymore.